The wheel of time turns, and ages come to pass, leaving memories that become legend. Legend fades to myth, and even myth is long forgotten when the age that gave it birth comes again. In one age, called the Third Age by some, an age yet to come, an age long past, a wind rose in the mountains of mist. The wind was not the beginning. There are neither beginnings nor endings to the turning of the wheel of time, but it was a beginning. Hello and welcome to my channel. In this video, yes, you got it, we are going to talk about The Eye of the World, Book 1 in the Wheel of Time, which we are currently doing the Great Wheel of Time read-along in the Wizardly Duo Discord, starting with Eye of the World for February, doing one book a month, going on to get through. So definitely check out the link for the Wizardly Duo Discord if you'd like to join. But for this video, this is less a review, more just kind of a discussion, because I have read this book many, many times. It's been a couple years since I've done a reread, so definitely felt like I was due. And I love this book. I love this series. Every time I open it up and I read that passage to start it out, it's just like coming home. It's just that feeling. It's like deeper than nostalgia. I just am like settling in to read The Wheel of Time again. And so obviously, you know, as you can tell, Wheel of Time is very special to me. And so I just kind of want to talk through and talk about this book and discuss all of the things that I really enjoy about it and kind of go from there. So let's check it out. I will have some like different timestamps or chapters or whatever you want to call them, just going through kind of the different parts. Now I will note that this video is going to be filled with spoilers for Book 1, The Eye of the World, but I will not be doing any spoilers for the future books. I plan to do a video like this for each book as we read them at once a month in the series, and each one will only be spoiler-filled for the book we read that month, because I know we have several people with the read-along who are going through for the first time. So with that, let's start in. So The Eye of the World. We open up on, at least to rereaders like myself, that familiar empty road with Rand and Tam and of course Bella, the noble steed, coming into town, into Emond's field within the Two Rivers. And I really do enjoy how much time we spend in the Two Rivers, because it's one of those things with a lot of fantasy books, especially when you're following, which the first book follows, some tropes for sure. It follows a little bit of like the Lord of the Rings type path that's very intentional. There are a lot of like landmarks and other things done before it kind of diverges and becomes its own thing. But we know we're starting with, you know, young farm boy going off on an adventure, you know, potentially the world is at stake, that kind of thing we've seen. A lot of times we do that, and it's just we're immediately jumping off into the adventure. And that would sound like a good thing, but we spend a lot of time in Emond's Field and the Two Rivers, comparatively in this book, learning about the town, making it feel real, introducing the characters, and that does a lot to set things up, not only just for this book, but for the series as a whole. It really gives us that firm foundation before we jump off. And it shows us something that is a lot more familiar than the fantasy world itself. We're not jumping immediately and seeing fantastical creatures and learning all these new things at once. We're just learning about a small town where many of the people probably seem familiar to like people that you may know if you've ever lived in a small town or if you live in a small town now, where a lot of those people are very, very believable, and we're setting up and learning about the world and kind of slowly seeing what's happening. And then enter a mysterious stranger or two with Moraine and Lan who come. Now, I love the way that Moraine is handled in this first book. Very mysterious. We don't know that much about Aes Sedai, and we're not really sure who she is. She's very aloof, she's very kind of cold, while at the same time trying to steer things along, and I think that does a lot for how this book works as well, too. Because we're just learning about this world when you read it the first time. You don't know who to trust. You don't know if these people are good or bad. And as we've found out from just learning about the world in general, Aes Sedai are looked at as being very, like, people distrust them. They're looked at in a poor light in many areas of the world, and most people don't really want anything to do with them. There's lots of superstitions, there's lots of things that people say about Aes Sedai, and it's looked at as almost like as bad as actual like creatures of the Dark One. And so that kind of setting really starts this off where it's mysterious. You know, we don't have Gandalf coming in, who is the, you know, wizard who you feel like you can trust to an extent. He's just the kindly old man wizard. We have Moiraine, a very mystical woman, and Lan, a very dangerous-seeming man, and that's who's starting our people off on the journey. With the journey beginning, and always, the first couple books, it's the adventure part I've always loved, and I really feel like I always will, with where we finally get off and we get going, and it's why the early books hold such a special place in my heart. But we get off on the journey, and then we start to slowly build in more and more. We find out about Trollocs and Myrddraal or Fades with the attack on Winternight, and then we go on and start to learn more. There's Drakkar and other creatures, and there's Dark Friends, and there's all kinds of things after them, and they're just running and really not understanding anything of what's going on as we start to get on that journey. And also, just once again, with the way that it's handled, where we're learning about things, but we're starting off pretty slow. We start with just mostly Rand's POV, as we're kind of, it's his eyes we're seeing this experience through as they go on this crazy trip. Then we get to Shadar Logoth. And Shadar Logoth is the, like, cursed city that used to be Eredal, of course. And this does something, too, which I really enjoy about this book. Because we've been told more and more about the Dark One. We know there's these Trollocs, we know there's Myrddraal, there's all these terrifying things, but now we're going into a different kind of evil. And what that does is, while it's some great scenes there, and it sets up, of course, a lot for this book and for later as well, with Mat and the dagger and so on and so forth, but we're seeing that there's more. This isn't just straight up like, we have the good guys and we have the Dark One. There's all kinds of varying levels of different kinds of evil as well. And so learning a bit about this, it also allows us to learn more about the history of Manetheren, or Manetheren, going back to my pronunciations. I read this book so many times before knowing the correct pronunciations for so many words and names and places. It's really hard for my brain to go back to the right ones, but I'm going to try, because I know people get cranky when I pronounce things my own way in videos, so I'm going to try for all of you. But we learn more about these places through it as well, and we get the interesting evil of Shadar and of the people there, and Mordath. And so it really does something more. There's more to this world. There's more to this evil as we go along. Then, of course, we have the party splits, you know, the trope in itself coming from Lord of the Rings as well. But when the party splits, we also do something really interesting there. That's when we start to branch out and get a few more POVs. Now, I know people always like to talk about how the Wheel of Time has so many POVs and like thousands of named characters. All true, but you're not just thrown into the wolves. So I think that's something, too, that other authors who have adopted the many POV style, it's very common, it's very popular these days. I like multiple POVs like that. Sometimes people throw you in a little too hard, though, but Jordan didn't do that. He had many, many POVs later, including like one-time POVs to show you certain scenes. But we start with mostly one, and there are only a few different POVs. We're still mostly looking at one POV through most of the Eye of the World, and it allows you to kind of learn what's going on, and then as we split out, we get to know the different groups of characters a little bit more, and we also get to see different aspects of the world built out as they go on different journeys. We have Egwene and Perrin, who go on to meet the traveling people, the Tuatha, and also Perrin finding out that he's a wolf brother, so we get that kind of done. We also get a lot more about the White Cloaks from that angle as well, which we'd already heard about them, but we see and learn more about them as well. We have Mat and Rand, who are going into Inn, and they're seeing more with like the Dark Friends and starting to see how that works. They have to face Myrddraal and Trollocs and all that kind of thing as well, and of course the loss of Tom. So they go on a very traumatic experience, but a very, very different experience, and so we get to learn more about their characters going through as well. And then of course we have Nynaeve and Moiraine and Lan, who are all also looking for the boys and getting those interactions between Nynaeve and Lan, where we get, I don't know, the kind of the budding romance. And so it's been talked a lot about, I know too, so Let me know your thoughts if this was your first time through. A lot of people have commented it seems sudden. It's after many, many read-throughs. I still agree some of it's somewhat sudden. There are a lot of little bits and pieces here and there kind of set up with that. But it's definitely, it's not that one that gets for me. There will be times later in the series where you really get insta love. This one wasn't quite that for me, but it's definitely one of those things people bring up. But so the party splitting, though, I like how it eases you into having multi-POVs, which will continue to increase the further you get in the series going that way. We then get to Caemlyn, and Caemlyn also does a lot to set up what's going on as well. And I know I'm skipping quite a lot of things as well, because I do plan to do a couple more in-depth videos on smaller topics, but there's so much to talk about, and this is already going to be a long video. But Caemlyn has a lot of scenes that I just absolutely love. I was talking to Andrew, and I literally told him, I just was reading the scene where Rand first meets Loyal in the library of the Queen's Blessing. I just had like this goofy grin on my face. I'm just like, oh man, it's just a scene that I really love. And also the whole scene with the palace, which is a little bit ridiculous too, with Rand falling over the wall and meeting Elaine and Gawain, and I'm trying so hard to pronounce that right for you guys. And going on there. So there's a lot that happens, and also introduces us to the Ways. Now, the Ways may be a bit of that kind of convenient way to fast travel, because, you know, a lot of fantasy will create some sort of convenient way to fast travel. But I really enjoy the fact that it has a cost. It's not an easy thing to do. There are definitely dangers. And also, once again, it introduces, without feeling like too much, at least to me, it introduces another kind of idea. There's evil and corruption there too. And we just start to see that this is more, once again, than just the light versus the dark. There are, you know, there's not just the dark one. There's all of these independent or maybe somewhat related types of corruption and darkness, and it really starts to show where the world is at, what kind of state it's in, and why the battle against the dark is so important now, because of all of these things that have happened over the last few thousand years since Lews Therin was alive and since the breaking of the world. And there's still a lot of stuff. So we're being introduced to that. And so that's something I, once again, enjoy with having that. And the way that it's done, where it's not just like, oh, we'll just go do this. It's like, no, this is really dangerous. We could all die. And, you know, it's not in great shape. And there's the Black Wind to worry about. And there's a lot more there with it as well. And that gets to, once again, with some liberal skipping, but the Blight. And the Blight, once again, is something that I love, because there are a couple parts of it that are done in a kind of a tropey way, but in a great trope, because I always think of it, God knows it wasn't the first, but from the Star Wars prequels, there's always a bigger fish, because we get to the Blight, and once again, like, these boys, and Egwene and Nynaeve as well, like, they've gone through so much. Like, they've had the Shadar, they've had the Black Wind and the Ways, they've had Trollocs and Myrtle and Dragcar and Darkfens and White Cloaks and just all of these things going on, and they're traveling and they're like, oh, we just hit the tip of the iceberg with all of these creatures of the Dark One. Like, we have the Blight where, like, the trees will try to kill you, and then all of these, like, other, like, creatures are gonna attack us, and then they're afraid of worms, and then the worms are like, oh, so that's the worst thing, and then we're getting closer to the mountains, and won't the worms follow? Oh no, they're scared of what's up in the mountains. And just the way it's set up, I just absolutely love, because once again, it's just showing you the breadth of this. This isn't simple, you know, we do have the Trollocs have been compared to like the typical kind of cannon fodder type of bad guys, but the Trollocs aren't, you know, the most absolutely original type creature necessarily. Myrtle are given quite a lot more for what they are. As well, but we're starting to see there's a whole host of creatures, and it's just in other ways that this really starts to just kind of show you that this is being told as a fairly simple fantasy story. You know, group of young people off on an adventure trying to save the world. It's told in a simple way, but it does so much to introduce you to more of what's going on in the world. And I haven't even touched on, we've had lots of places mentioned, we've had other big events set up. The amount of foreshadowing alone in the Eye of the World is astonishing. And it is definitely something that you you won't get the full effect of it unless you do reread. And it's every time, I feel like every time I would reread, I get something new, or like I'll notice something so subtle that I didn't even think about it before, because there's so much in there. So many things that are set up or mentioned in this book directly are foreshadowing for things that happen as late as the final volume of The Wheel of Time. Set up in this book. There are many things that literally are set up that far in advance that happen. And it's just the way that it's done is so masterfully written and weaved in. And Robert Jordan, for me, bar none, is the master of foreshadowing with all of these different pieces. It's really difficult to weave. The only other one that comes to mind, except down on a much smaller scale, is The Long Price Quartet by Daniel Abraham, where everything is very intentional with all these little actions. This is done on a much larger, grander scale, and it's done very well. I just can't imagine trying to keep track of that, and so for him and like his assistants for continuity, like, bless them, because they did a fantastic job. And then, of course, it all ends at the Eye of the World, which remains an area of some contention on the meanings and information about what happened there. I know many first-time readers find it a bit confusing, so if you found it confusing or you just want to know more about it from somebody who has agonized over all of the details of the Eye part of the Eye of the World very specifically, I've got good news. I will be doing a full video coming up next week, which is really specifically about what happened at the Eye of the World, what is the Eye of the World, and just all discussing that part in more detail. This is a video I'm really excited to do because, like I said, I've spent probably a ridiculous amount of time thinking about this over the years, and I really want to, and I look forward to doing more specific Wheel of Time content as I read through. I've always meant to do so, but I figured it'd be better to do content when everything's very fresh from doing another reread. But I was digging into the Wheel of Time as much as I have. That'll be a really fun topic to discuss. Also, we'll be able to get to some of my controversial opinions the further and further we get on very specific things, because Wheel of Time is also a series I've never found another series, at least for me, and I definitely could be wrong here, but that can just be discussed endlessly. And I have spent many hours, especially when I was a teenager, online, just discussing, debating, talking theories, digging into things, digging into this world. And so, for the Eye of the World, we've just scratched the surface. There is so much more to come, and I hope that everybody who's along with the journey for us on the Buddy Read is enjoying it as well, because I'm so happy to be back in the land of the Wheel of Time, and once again starting on this journey for another time around. So, once again, if you have not already joined the read-along and you do want to, or maybe you could catch up if you haven't read the first book yet, you could join for a reread, or even if you're partway through the series, check in, because we're doing one book a month, so if you needed a push to keep going, you can definitely look and see when we're going to be getting to that book and go from there. But check the link, as always, in the description for the Wizardly Duo Discord if you want to join the Buddy Read for this series. Make sure to give the video a like if you enjoyed it, and if you enjoy my content and want to see more, including my Eye of the World video, like I said, that's coming out next week, with a lot more detail, make sure to subscribe.